The story of Hindu-Muslim relations in Bengal is a tale woven from centuries of shared history, shifting boundaries, complex migrations, and moments of profound transformation. To understand its nuances, we must journey back to the 13th century, when Bengal first felt the gentle touch of Sufi saints and the transformative power of their inclusive message. Sufism, a mystical form of Islam, arrived in Bengal not as an instrument of conquest, but as a bridge to the local populace. These wandering holy men, with their songs and stories, their simple lives and open hearts, settled among the villages and towns of Bengal. They spoke the languages of the people, celebrated the rhythms of the land, and adapted to local customs, often blending their spiritual practices with those of their Hindu neighbors. This syncretism fostered an atmosphere of coexistence, where Hindus and Muslims shared not only marketplaces and fields, but also music, folklore, and festivals. In those early centuries, Bengal was a tapestry of cultural exchange. The ball singers, itinerant mystics revered by both Hindus and Muslims, wandered the countryside, singing of love, unity, and the divine beyond boundaries. Villages would gather for harvest festivals and river fairs, where the distinctions between communities seemed to blur in the shared joys and sorrows of rural life. From the banks of the Ganges to the lush green delta, the people of Bengal shaped a unique hybrid culture, resilient yet receptive, ever-evolving. The arrival of Muslim rulers, beginning with the Bengal Sultanate and later the Mughal Empire, introduced new administrative frameworks and artistic influences, but the underlying fabric of society remained deeply pluralistic. Sufi shrines stood alongside Hindu temples, and local customs continued to inform religious practice. For centuries, Bengal endured as a province where difference was not only tolerated, but celebrated, a place where faiths could learn from one another, even as they retained their own distinctiveness. Yet history is seldom static. The 18th century brought winds of change that would unsettle this delicate balance. The decline of the Mughal Empire, once a stabilizing force, opened the door to British colonial rule. When the British East India Company seized control in 1757, after the Battle of Plassey, the fabric of agrarian society was irrevocably altered. The British introduced the permanent settlement in 1793, a land revenue system that empowered Hindu zamindars, or landowners, at the expense of the largely Muslim peasantry. This economic reordering had profound consequences. Land ownership and wealth became linked to religious identity, and the previously fluid boundaries between communities hardened into lines of division. Where once the fields were tilled by both Hindu and Muslim farmers in relative harmony, now resentment simmered as wealth and privilege shifted. The British, recognizing the potential for division, began to manipulate these fault lines, employing a strategy of divide and rule. Political mobilization, once centered on local and regional interests, increasingly turned to religious identities. Reform movements, literary societies, and political organizations sprang up in Calcutta and Dhaka, often emphasizing either Hindu or Muslim interests. The seeds of communal tension were sown, and over time, they would grow into more bitter fruit. The early 20th century marked a turning point. In 1905, the British Raj announced the first partition of Bengal, splitting it into two provinces, East Bengal and Assam, with a Muslim majority, and West Bengal, with a Hindu majority. The stated purpose was administrative efficiency, but the real impact was psychological and political. For the first time, territorial boundaries were explicitly linked to religious demographics. Communities that had long lived side by side were now reimagined as occupants of separate homelands. The partition was met with fierce opposition, especially from Bengali Hindus, who saw it as an attempt to weaken their influence. The division was eventually reversed in 1911, but the precedent had been set. From this moment onward, the idea of communal identity became central to political discourse. Organizations like the Muslim League and the Indian National Congress vied for influence, often framing their platforms in terms of religious representation. Bengal became a battleground for competing visions of the future, one secular and pluralistic, the other communal and exclusive. The old bonds of coexistence frayed under the pressure of new ideologies and the relentless logic of colonial administration. The most profound rupture came in 1947, with the Partition of India. As British rule ended, the subcontinent was carved into two new nations, India and Pakistan. Bengal itself was split in two, with West Bengal joining India and East Bengal becoming part of Pakistan, later to become Bangladesh in 1971. The partition was accompanied by unprecedented violence, mass migrations, and the trauma of communities torn apart. The dream of Pakistan, a homeland for Muslims, collided with the reality of millions forced to leave their ancestral homes. Migration patterns during this period were complex and far-reaching. Large numbers of Bengali Hindus left East Bengal, seeking refuge in West Bengal, India. Their journey was often fraught with loss and hardship, as they struggled to find new livelihoods and integrate into unfamiliar surroundings. The linguistic divide between the Bengal refugees from the east and the Goti natives of the west added another layer of difficulty. While both spoke Bengali, subtle differences in accent, idiom, and custom marked them as outsiders. Competition for jobs, housing, and resources sometimes led to tensions, and the class and caste distinctions among Hindus persisted in the new social landscape. Meanwhile, Bengali Muslims from West Bengal and Urdu-speaking Muslims from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh migrated to East Bengal. For the most part, these Muslim migrants were absorbed into the broader Bengali Muslim identity, aided by linguistic and cultural similarities. However, the Urdu-speaking migrants, known as Biharis, would later face challenges during the 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War, when their linguistic and political affiliations set them apart from the Bengali majority. The aftermath of partition left deep scars on Bengal's social structure. Many middle-class Bengali Hindus chose to remain in East Pakistan after 1947, especially in rural areas and small towns. Their decision was often rooted in attachment to land, family, and tradition. But waves of migration continued during and after episodes of communal violence, notably in 1950, 1964, and during the War of 1971. In West Bengal, the influx of refugees, often from lower castes, created new social dynamics. The local Hindu elite, primarily the Gotis, sometimes viewed the newcomers with suspicion or disdain, and caste-based discrimination persisted, even as the broader society grappled with the challenges of integration. In East Bengal, religious identity remained important, but caste distinctions among Muslims carried less political weight. The shared experience of migration, hardship, and adaptation helped forge a more unified Bengali Muslim community. The political and cultural landscape of East Bengal was shaped by the interplay between tradition and change, as the region moved toward independence and the creation of Bangladesh. Throughout these centuries of transformation, the story of Hindu-Muslim relations in Bengal has been one of both conflict and accommodation. The region's history is marked by moments of violence and division, but also by periods of creativity, collaboration, and resilience. The legacy of Sufi influence, the challenges of colonial rule, the trauma of partition, and the ongoing struggles for identity and belonging continue to shape Bengal society today. To understand Bengal is to recognize the ways in which migration, assimilation, and social structure have been shaped by forces both internal and external. It is to see the pain of displacement and the hope of new beginnings, the persistence of old prejudices, and the possibility of reconciliation. Above all, it is to acknowledge the complexity of a region where boundaries are never simple and where the past is always present in the lives of its people. In the end, the history of Hindu-Muslim relations in Bengal is a story of adaptation and survival. It is a testament to the enduring power of shared culture, even in the face of profound upheaval. From the songs of the Baul mystics to the struggles of refugees, from the fields of the Delta to the crowded streets of Calcutta and Dhaka, the people of Bengal have learned to navigate the shifting currents of history, sometimes divided, often united, always searching for a place to belong.